It was the biggest heist in history.
Speaking of robberies,
the attackers struck like lightning and made away with $1.5 billion. Not in gold, diamonds, or art, but ERC20 tokens. Yes, February's hack on ByBit was devastatingly effective, and yet the exchange and the cryptoverse made it out virtually unscathed. But the more we learn about what happened that day, the more mind-boggling it gets.
I mean, truly, the mind boggles.
My name is Guy, and stay tuned to find out what went down, who was involved, and what happened to all that stolen crypto. Now, crypto has rendered us somewhat numb to seeing fortunes made and destroyed in seconds. But the ByBit hack is uncharted territory. The perpetrators stole $1.5 billion in a matter of minutes. The scale of this heist makes all the sacks of gold, diamonds, fine art, and cash, as well as the balaclavas and getaway cars of the last 100 years, look like child's play. Normally, to steal this much money in one go, you'd need to go to a central bank, which is what happened in the previous biggest heist of all time. In 2003, more than $900 million in cash was stolen from the Central Bank of Iraq shortly before the arrival of invading forces. And yes, even adjusted for inflation, that's still well short of the amount that the ByBit hackers got away with. So, don't let anyone tell you that crypto is anything short of a revolution in value transfer. The case has raised fresh questions about just how secure the industry's best practices really are. It's reignited debate about decentralized value transfer via blockchain and whether it should be made compromisable in the name of fighting crime. And of course, it's got people asking, where the hell is the money? Now, unless you've been living under a rock, you'll probably know that the prime suspect is a group allegedly working on behalf of a certain government. But we'll get to these questions a little later on. First, let's return to the scene of the crime and find out exactly what went down that day. 21st of February 2025, ByBit HQ. It's just another Friday at the world's second largest crypto exchange. ETH bulls have been getting liquidated left and right for weeks on end, but complaints about the chart being a crime scene are mostly in good humour. Little did they know, they just became bystanders at the scene of a real crime of historic proportions. At 3:44 p.m. UTC, ByBit co-founder and CEO Ben Zhou posted a hurried wall of text on Twitter, informing the community of a security incident. ByBit had been conducting a routine transfer of ETH from cold to warm storage. As usual, this meant multiple authorized ByBit employees had to sign off on the transaction. To the 3 personnel to whom the transaction was proposed, it looked like just another internal transfer of the kind that they authorize every day. So they signed the transaction, transferring out 401,346 ETH, and thought nothing of it. However, the funds were taking a long time to arrive in ByBit's warm wallet. What could explain the delay? The gas fee was only 72 cents, so it wasn't exactly a busy day on Ethereum. Was it a node synchronization issue, a validator client bug, or maybe an RPC problem? The truth was much worse.
This is the worst!
The transaction was not stuck, but had been intercepted in a highly sophisticated attack. Ben explained in his tweet, quote, "Hacker took control of the specific ETH cold wallet we signed and transferred all ETH in the cold wallet to this unidentified address." He provided a link to the transaction in question on Etherscan, which revealed an attacker had called a sweep function to drain 401,346 ETH from a wallet labeled ByBit Cold Wallet 1. At 5:15 p.m, Ben hopped on a livestream to discuss the incident and reassure the community that ByBit was solvent, client assets were backed one-to-one, and that there was no disruption to its products and services, including withdrawals. Now, this was encouraging, as crypto exchanges have been known to freeze withdrawals over much lesser incidents. Ben explained that ByBit would be able to cover the loss even if none of the stolen funds could be recovered. This was even more impressive considering that the loss in question was the biggest theft in history. According to Ben, ByBit would need a couple of bridge loans to navigate the short-term liquidity crunch, but otherwise it was able to take the hit. No other cold wallets were affected, and ByBit's reserves were primarily in BTC and thus not affected directly by any market impact on ETH. Interestingly, there was no significant dump in the price of ETH immediately in the wake of the incident. On the daily timeframe, 21st of February looks like just another day in the long, slippery slope from the final boss at $4,000 all the way back down to Goblin Town. Anyway, at 7:07 p.m, crypto detective Zach XBT shared a post-mortem that showed the stolen assets being rapidly diffused across a large cluster of addresses and laundered through various means. This would make it very difficult for anyone to freeze or recover them. However, the attackers didn't conceal a trail of transactions leading back from this cluster of wallets to previous hacks on the Phemex and BingX exchanges. Zach's evidence all but confirmed the culprit's identity. As many of us suspected, there was only one group who could pull off an attack like this and feel no need to cover their tracks: the Lazarus Group. More on them later. Now, at 2:51 a.m. on the 22nd of February, Benjo tweeted that ByBit had processed all of the withdrawal requests that had been received after the attack less than 12 hours previously and resumed normal operations. The more than 350,000 withdrawals processed amounted to an outflow of approximately $4 billion. Then, at 7:29 a.m, on-chain data showed a subsequent inflow of more than $4 billion back into ByBit, more than enough to cover the liquidity crater left by the attack. Interestingly, this was 2 days before ByBit received $1.23 billion in ETH through bridge loans, whale deposits, and OTC purchases, covering the stolen ETH specifically. So, this movement is suggestive of users hurriedly making withdrawals before confirming that ByBit was still safe and up and running, and then redepositing their funds. Of course, that's just speculation though. One thing that's for sure is that ByBit's handling of the attack set a new bar for crypto crisis management. Very soon after being robbed of $1.5 billion in an unprecedented and highly sophisticated attack, ByBit's CEO was calmly and transparently communicating the incident on X and live streaming in 2 languages. Comms were prompt and transparent, and most importantly, all Ben's reassurances to the community were truthful and fulfilled within hours. ByBit's ability to process a further $4 billion of withdrawals without the exchange so much as flinching was truly impressive. And ByBit deserves all of the praise it got for its response. If every crypto security incident could be handled this well, our industry would be a better place. I don't need to remind you of the long list of poorly handled crypto crises that have brought down many of the companies and projects involved in recent years. Maybe we're talking apples and oranges though, because many of those crises were self-inflicted. But anyway, it's time to talk about our prime suspect, the Lazarus Group.
Apologies for the interruption, folks, but I very quickly want to tell you about the Coin Bureau deals page. Now, if you're interested in things like discounts on hardware wallets, money off trading fees, and exchange sign-up bonuses, then the Coin Bureau deals page is absolutely the place that you need to check out. The link is in the description below. These are some of the best deals and promos in all of crypto, so check it out when you have a moment. Okay, enough from me, back to the video.
Now, the name Lazarus Group is just one of many aliases that have been either used by the hackers themselves or given to them by the US Army, Department of Homeland Security, and cybersecurity organizations over the years. Little is known about this organization, and basic details about its structure, how many members it has, how it refers to itself, and so on, remain a mystery. However, the hackers that we somewhat loosely describe as the Lazarus Group are widely believed to be working on behalf of the government of North Korea. Now, the group allegedly debuted in 2009 with a large-scale but unsophisticated DDoS attack on websites in the US and South Korea. This was followed by a series of progressively more complex attacks on South Korean media, financial, and internet infrastructure in the 2010s. The crypto crimes began in 2017 when Lazarus Group was accused of being behind WannaCry, a massive global ransomware attack that hit an estimated 200,000 computers in 150 countries. It primarily affected Russia, India, Ukraine and Taiwan, but also institutions ranging from the UK's National Health Service to aircraft manufacturer Boeing and universities in China. Now, the ransomware in question was a crypto worm, a piece of malware that autonomously spreads through computer networks, encrypting all of the data on an infected device before demanding a ransom payment of BTC in exchange for the key. But this was an odd case. In contrast to the astonishing effectiveness of the attack, the ransom itself was a flop. It was quickly undermined when victims found that their encrypted data were not recoverable even after paying the ransom. But the strangest part of the attack was how easily it was foiled. The whole world was gripped by shock and panic for just over 7 hours before a British security researcher found a kill switch in the virus and was immediately able to stop it propagating itself and infecting new machines. Well, that was easy. In the end, the culprits were only able to collect $130,000 in BTC. The suspicious details of the case led many to believe that WannaCry was not financially motivated, but merely intended to cause chaos. Well, whatever WannaCry was all about, subsequent crypto attacks attributed to Lazarus were clearly about the money. The same year, South Korean crypto businesses including BitHum, UBit and NiceHash lost several thousand BTC to hacks attributed to the Lazarus Group. In the early 2020s, the crypto market grew tremendously, and as the pie got bigger, so did the hacks. DeFi bridges proved to be vulnerable and highly lucrative targets. In March 2022, the FBI accused the Lazarus Group of being behind the theft of $620 million worth of crypto from the Ronin network, the bridge used by Axie Infinity. 3 months later, a further $100 million of crypto was stolen from Harmony's Horizon bridge in a hack that was also attributed to the Lazarus Group. A report published by blockchain security platform ImmuneFi alleged that Lazarus was behind almost 20% of the crypto lost to hacks in 2023, amounting to more than $300 million. In July 2024, India's WazirX exchange was brought down by a fatal attack that stole $235 million worth of crypto from a multi-sig cold wallet, prompting the exchange to halt withdrawals and cease operations immediately. And this leads us to ByBit. If you've been paying attention, you'll remember that February's attack also targeted an outgoing transaction from an exchange multi-sig cold wallet. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wait a second, a cold multi-sig wallet? That's the industry standard used by most custodians and exchanges. To move crypto in or out of one of these, a majority of at least 3 out of 5 authorized personnel have to sign off on each and every transaction. So, how is it possible for one of these wallets to be compromised? Unless, of course, this was a criminal conspiracy by all of the transaction's 5 potential signers. But robbing your employer of more than $1 billion on a public ledger is a non-starter, and it was clear from the start that this was no inside job. Well, as usual, the system is only as robust as its most vulnerable part. Unlike Bitcoin, Ethereum does not have native multi-sig wallets, so instead they have to be built using smart contracts. To interact with and manage these smart contract multi-sig wallets on Ethereum, it's common to use a web interface. Now, one of the more popular ones is called SafeWallet. ByBit's investigation traced the origin of the hack to a compromised machine belonging to a SafeWallet developer. We still don't know how this machine was compromised, but the attackers used it to inject malicious code into the SafeWallet user interface. This was a very subtle change that targeted ByBit specifically. The interface would function normally until the very moment that ByBit was about to execute a transaction from their cold wallet. The malicious code would trigger when one of ByBit's authorized signers proposed a multi-sig cold wallet transaction for approval by the rest of the signers. The compromised SafeWallet interface would then pull a last-second switcheroo, replacing the intended transaction with a different one that, to the unsuspecting observer, was indistinguishable. And here's the crazy part. The transaction that replaced the one proposed by ByBit was basically identical. That's except for a parameter inconspicuously called operation, whose value the hackers changed from 0 to 1. Now, we don't know if any of the ByBit signers even saw this parameter on their screens, but even if they did, it's very possible that it wouldn't have meant anything to them. I mean, Operation 0, Operation 1, what difference does that make, and how big of a deal could it be? Well, unfortunately, the answer is very big, because in this case, 0 means that ByBit Cold Wallet 1 is controlled by ByBit, and 1 means that control has been delegated to the hackers. You would think they might call it Operation to decide who controls this wallet, or something more obvious, but no, it's just called Operation. And that's how at least 3 ByBit employees signed the transaction that handed hackers the keys to $1.5 billion in crypto. They didn't suspect a thing, and who can blame them? Now, if we assume that the hackers were agents of the government of North Korea, it follows that these funds will go to North Korea's treasury. It'll then be spent on all of the stuff that governments usually spend money on. One of these is defense, including development of North Korea's nuclear weapons. Other expenditures include public healthcare, education, housing, agriculture, and so on. But that stuff doesn't make for very good headlines. Anyway, before any of that can happen though, the crypto that was taken from ByBit needs laundering. Now, in the immediate aftermath of the hack, some observers called for Ethereum to be rolled back to a pre-hack state, which would require a hard fork. Now, this is an extreme response that would violate most of the principles that make cryptocurrency valuable, particularly blockchain immutability. Ethereum would lose its credibly neutral status, and the precedent would no doubt empower powerful actors to demand more rollbacks of public blockchains in the future. On the other hand, though, we already have a very prominent precedent for rolling back Ethereum. An enormous quantity of ETH was stolen in the infamous 2016 DAO hack, leading to a controversial hard fork that gave us 2 Ethereums. One was Ethereum Classic, which was the continuation of the original blockchain, hack included. This was favored by those who prioritized immutability over the recovery of funds. But this is not the Ethereum that we're all using today. The Ethereum that emerged victorious is the fork that rolled back the chain to its pre-hack state and started again from there. Now, this split was a pivotal and decisive moment in crypto history that highlighted the trade-offs that we face between security, decentralization, and immutability. In any case, few of us really wanted a rerun of this hard fork, but thankfully the hackers put this debate out of its misery by bridging the stolen funds off Ethereum altogether. This was done very quickly and efficiently, indicating a highly coordinated and meticulously planned operation. The hackers used a familiar strategy of repeated cross-chain bridging and mixing, followed by more bridging and mixing ad infinitum. By the 3rd of March, all of the stolen ETH had been moved, with the vast majority bridged to BTC, mostly via Thorchain, which enjoyed an unprecedented surge in activity in the days following the hack. BTC was chosen as the destination crypto for several reasons. Unlike ERC20 tokens like USDT and USDC, BTC cannot be frozen by centralized intermediaries. And, being by far the largest, most liquid, and most desirable crypto, it's relatively straightforward to dispose of $1.5 billion of BTC without cratering the market. After conversion to BTC, a portion of the funds were deposited to mixers, DeFi services that pool assets from multiple users and then redistribute them to new wallets in different and often randomized amounts. This is a spanner in the works for most investigators who'll end up chasing false leads and mistakenly tracing unrelated withdrawals from mixers. However, a large portion of the funds have been sitting tight in BTC, leading to speculation that the hackers will dispose of it via OTC transactions. It'll be very interesting to see where this BTC goes on-chain. One possibility that springs to mind is international trade with Russia, for 2 main reasons. 1, Russia is allied with North Korea, and 2, Russia's government has publicly encouraged the use of BTC to evade economic sanctions that seek to shut Russia and North Korea out of international trade and the global financial system. Alternatively, this BTC might just be pending further obfuscation through bridges and mixers to be liquidated in a trickle, or perhaps torrent, via offshore exchanges and DeFi protocols. We'll have to wait and see, but for now, these hackers are running rings around our industry, law enforcement, and regulators. Now, if multi-signature cold wallets at a major exchange with a previously spotless security record aren't safe, then our best security practices may need updating. Although the methods used in this case were comparable to those used against WazirX last year, so perhaps the industry should have learned a lesson back then and switched to multi-party computation wallets, which might have prevented the ByBit hack. We'll keep you updated on any major developments in this story in a future video, but until then, stay vigilant and, for goodness sake, don't keep your crypto on an exchange for any longer than it has to be there. Oh, and if this case has got you pondering about Ethereum, then why not check out our latest video on the sick man of crypto right over here. That's all from me for now. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Guy, over and out.